Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we've got a really heavy-hitting session for you.
Yeah, this one is it's quite a bit to unpack.
It really is. So we establish this premise all the time, right? We often talk about AI taking jobs. Like, will AI write my email or handle my
Yeah.
coding?
Right, the typical labor anxiety.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But today we are looking at something much quieter and honestly much more systemic. We aren't looking at AI taking jobs. We are looking at AI taking capital.
Which is a fundamental shift in the macroeconomics.
Yeah, it's the plumbing of it all. And to do that, we're returning to our specific source material for this. We're looking at the series AI Futures by Jafar Humayun.
Such a brilliant framework.
It is. And before we get too deep, I want to start with that crucial framing he always uses. Let me just quote the source directly here to set our intellectual ground rules. Humayun says, AI Futures is not a forecast, it's a framework.
That is so important to keep in mind.
Right. Because our goal for you today isn't to predict what the world looks like in 2050.
We aren't making prophecies here.
No. We are modeling the actual mechanics of what is happening right now today.
The physics of the current moment.
Exactly. Now, just to give you a very brief recap of our previous context, in episode 17, we looked at the concept of the strategic edge node.
Right, that was our analysis of the European Union.
Yes. We talked about how the EU is transitioning into this sort of digital tenant, balancing incredibly high regulation with a deepening dependency on infrastructure that it fundamentally doesn't own.
They write the rules for the house, but they don't own the property.
Perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
Which brings us to today's focus. We're looking at episode 18 of Humayun's work titled The Forex Drain.
And this is where the tenant analogy gets very real.
Because it's about the rent. The thesis here is that we are undergoing a massive structural shift in global capital flows. We are moving away from domestic labor circulation and entering an era of international intelligence metering.
Intelligence metering, that phrase is going to be the anchor for this whole session.
It is. But let's do a quick tone check right here at the top. Because when we talk about wealth leaving a country, it is very easy to use charged language.
Very easy. People want to talk about theft or some kind of digital colonialism.
Right, and we need to be explicit. This is not about theft. It's not about bad actors. It is entirely about structural mechanics.
It's just about how the flow of value fundamentally changes when you switch from paying a human salary to calling an API.
Exactly. It's an architecture shift. So let's get into section 1, the redirection of economic circulation. To understand this new model, we really need to visualize the old way money moved. The traditional model.
What the source calls the salary loop.
Walk us through that, just basic econ. One for a second.
Sure. Think about the ripple effect of a standard salary. Let's say a mid-sized company pays a local worker their wages for the month.
Okay, so the money lands in the worker's bank account.
Right, but the money doesn't stop there. That worker takes that paycheck and they pay local rent to a landlord.
The landlord has income now.
Exactly. Then the worker buys groceries at the local store down the street. They pay for local services. They go to a barber, they pay a mechanic to fix their car.
So that initial sum of money from the company effectively circulates within the domestic economy multiple times.
It ripples outward. $1 actually creates several dollars worth of economic activity because it stays in the community.
That makes total sense. But now Humayun introduces the shift, the new model, the API-centric transaction.
Right. So imagine that exact same task the worker was doing is now automated.
The company decides to use an AI model instead.
Exactly. So contrast the flow of money now. A task once performed by a local worker is no longer a salary. It is an outbound API call to a server located abroad.
And the key insight here is what the source calls capital redirection.
Yes. The money doesn't circulate locally anymore.
It leaves immediately.
Instantly. The ripple effect is completely gone. That API call doesn't buy groceries in your neighborhood. A data center in another country doesn't get a haircut at your local barber.
So the wealth just vanishes from the domestic loop. Which leads us perfectly into section 2, the intelligence meter. Because we used to buy software differently.
Oh, absolutely. We used to buy software as a product.
Right, like going to the store and buying a CD-ROM in a plastic box. You installed it and you owned it forever.
But AI is not a product. Humayun defines it as a recurring utility.
You are renting intelligence.
You are. And the mechanism of that outflow is fascinating when you break down the chain of costs described in the source.
Let's walk through that chain for the listener because it happens so fast we don't even notice it. Step 1 is the prompt.
Right. The user types a question or a command into the interface.
And then step 2 is the token usage.
The AI model has to process that query. It breaks the text down into tokens to understand it.
Which triggers step 3, the actual compute cost.
Yes. Energy and physical hardware are utilized in a massive server farm somewhere, usually very far away.
And that leads to step 4, which is the real kicker, foreign currency outflow.
Real dollars literally leave the country to pay the provider for that compute and that token usage.
And this brings up the concept of the pulse metric. This isn't like an annual software license where you pay once a year.
No, it happens by the second, every single time a user hits enter.
It's constant. And Humayun introduces this idea of conditional economic logic here.
This is where it gets macro. If a nation becomes a net importer of automated cognition, its entire economic pulse changes.
It's no longer measured by traditional domestic trade.
Exactly. Its economic health is increasingly measured by its outbound subscription data. The intelligence meter is always running.
Which creates a really bizarre situation because usually we think higher productivity is universally good for an economy.
That's the standard assumption, yes.
But this is section 3, productivity without participation. We have this paradox of efficiency. Why is this specific type of productivity different?
Because of a concept the source calls disconnected productivity.
Disconnected how?
Well, think about the company. The task gets completed incredibly fast. The return on investment for the company is very high.
They are more productive than ever.
Yes, but the participation of the human beings is deleted from the equation.
Ah, I see. And the source uses this really specific imagery here that stuck with me. The lunch vendor example.
It is such a brilliant way to visualize it. Humayun points out that when a job becomes an API call, there is no physical office space to rent.
Right. You don't need desks for an algorithm.
And because there's no office, there are no workers walking outside at noon.
Which means there is no lunch vendor across the street selling food to those workers.
Precisely. The local ecosystem, that fragile web of services and families and small businesses, remains completely untouched by the wealth generated from that highly productive task.
The company succeeds, but the street outside the company goes quiet.
That is disconnected productivity in a nutshell.
So naturally, this makes me wonder who is actually at risk here. If you look at section 4, it's about the vulnerability of middleband nations.
This is probably the most counterintuitive finding in the entire framework.
Yeah, because you would assume this just affects the absolute poorest nations the most, the ones struggling with basic infrastructure.
You would think that. But Humayun clarifies that this shift actually hits the middleband the hardest.
Let's identify these nations for the listener. Who exactly are we talking about?
We are talking about countries that built their recent economic miracles on BPO, business process outsourcing.
The global coding hubs, the massive customer support centers.
Exactly. Nations that spent the last 2 decades training millions of their citizens in Excel and English.
And they did that to become what the source calls the exportable cognition trap.
Right. They spent decades successfully positioning themselves as exporters of human hours.
It was a great strategy.
It was. It lifted millions into the middle class. But now we are seeing the inversion.
They are transitioning.
They are rapidly transitioning from being exporters of human hours to becoming net importers of machine tokens.
Wow. They are literally buying the exact function they used to sell to the world.
It is a profound asymmetric exposure. They are massively vulnerable to this shift in the global supply chain because their primary export is cognitive labor.
Which is exactly what AI automates first.
Right. If your economy is based on agriculture, AI isn't going to replace your physical crops tomorrow. But if your economy is based on answering emails and writing basic code, you are directly in the path of this transition.
So if this is happening on such a massive scale, why aren't we hearing about it? That brings us to section 5, the invisible trade imbalance.
It's the silence of the shift.
Yeah, I mean, usually if an entire industry is threatened, we see it on the news every night, like a trade war or an oil crisis.
But Humayun explains it beautifully. He says there are no ports, no flags, no alarm bells.
Because there's no physical cargo.
Exactly. Unlike oil or wheat or steel, there is no physical container to track through customs.
You don't see massive ships sitting off the coast waiting to unload machine tokens.
No. It happens instantly through fiber optic cables, and these embedded dependencies are incredibly hidden.
How so? How are these AI imports hidden from plain sight?
Because they are white-labeled inside the productivity suites businesses already use.
Oh, right. It's just a new feature in a software you already pay for.
Exactly. It's embedded directly into customer relationship management platforms. It's baked into legal drafting tools. You don't even realize you're importing foreign intelligence.
It's just click generate.
Yes. And that creates what the source calls the silent impact.
The economic consequences that don't make the front page.
Right. Foreign exchange reserves, the Forex and the Forex Drain, dwindled quietly.
Because the money is constantly flowing out to pay for those API calls.
Yes. And simultaneously, domestic demand softens because the local workers aren't getting those salaries to spend at the lunch vendor.
But there is no singular massive layoff event to point a camera at.
Exactly. There isn't a factory closure where 1,000 people walk out with boxes at the same time. It's just a gradual silence where there was once noise.
It's a structural decoupling.
That is the exact phrase.
So where does this actually lead structurally? Because it feels like once this starts, it would be hard to stop. Is it just a temporary dip while the economy adjusts?
According to Section 6, it is not temporary. Humayun presents this as the model of subtraction. It is a recursive pressure loop.
A feedback dynamic. Let's walk the listener through the steps of this loop because it is fascinating.
Step 1 is reduced domestic income. The salaries are replaced by API calls.
Right, we covered that. The money leaves.
Which directly leads to Step 2, softening tax revenue.
Because if the money isn't circulating locally, the government can't tax those transactions.
Exactly. And less tax revenue creates Step 3, strained public infrastructure.
The roads, the schools, the hospitals, they start to lack funding.
Yes. And when the infrastructure strains, you hit Step 4, accelerated talent migration.
The brain drain worsens.
The highly skilled workers, the ones who could potentially build local alternatives, look around at the declining services and they leave. They migrate to the centers of capital.
Which triggers Step 5. Reduce builder capacity.
With fewer experts remaining in the country, the nation physically cannot build its own domestic AI models.
They lose the talent required to compete.
Which closes the loop with Step 6, deepening dependence.
Because they can't build it, they have to import even more external AI to keep their economy functioning.
Exactly. The loop feeds itself. It is Forex attrition at a national scale.
Now, we need to put a firm tone guardrail here. Because hearing that loop, it sounds incredibly bleak.
Yes, and Humayun is very careful not to frame this as a prophecy of ruin.
Right, we aren't saying the end is nigh.
Not at all. It is a mechanical feedback loop. It is difficult to break once started, but it is a model of subtraction, not a war. It's an incentive structure doing what it was designed to do, which is optimize cost mechanics.
It's just that the optimization happens to siphon capital away from the middle band.
Precisely.
So synthesizing this whole deep dive today, we've covered a massive structural change. What is the main takeaway for the listener?
The main takeaway is that global capital flows are shifting from traditional trade to intelligence metering.
We are moving from paying for local human time to paying for foreign machine cognition by the second.
And we have to reiterate the source's final thought. Wealth isn't being extracted with malicious intent.
Right, there is no grand conspiracy.
It is streaming out through optimized architecture. It is subtraction, pure mechanics.
It's a heavy concept to grasp. And I want to leave you, the listener, with this provocative thought to mull over. Just visualize a nation paying for its own economic erosion one token at a time. Sinking beneath a wave they didn't trigger simply because the architecture is so efficient.
It's a quiet shift, but a permanent one.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this brings us to an interesting precipice.
Because if wages are decoupling from productivity, what happens to everything built on top of those wages?
Exactly, which is the perfect tease for our next session. Next, in AI Futures, we are looking at episode 19, The Lending Engine Cracks.
That is going to be an intense one.
The central question we will be asking is what happens to credit and institutional stability when wages decouple from the debt cycle?
The whole banking system assumes a salary loop.
And we just proved the salary loop is being redirected. So we will dive into those mechanics next time. Stay tuned.
Stay curious.
Stay systemic. Thanks for joining us.